All right, welcome back to the 55 Buick Special POS build. The you know what it is. Anyway, car's up on the lift at the moment, and so the floors are done, trunk is done, getting closer to actually putting the engine back in this thing, but it is going to need wiring. For the wiring on this car, there's going to be basically two harnesses. There's going to be the main harness that's for the whole car, other than engine and transmission. And then there'll be the harness that comes from the donor vehicle for the engine, transmission. If I was running electric, I'm not running a Turbo 400, and PCM connections and sensors and all that. So that's going to be a completely different harness. So the first harness I'm going to deal with is going to be for the actual main car. So keeping with my usual low to really low to no buck budget on these cars, what I have is a harness that I took out of a 1987 Monte Carlo. I've dealt a lot with Monte Carlos over the years, super sports especially, and I happen to have stuff laying around from those cars. So what I have is a complete wiring harness, basically from a car. And 87s, they're computer controlled, so they have a computer controlled carb and lockup for the trans and stuff that I'm not going to need. So there's going to be circuits on this harness to remove. But I have pretty much everything here. There are some cut wires that I'll have to trace out. But this, there's not a whole lot to it. This is the under dash harness laying on the floor here. And I have the intermediate harness that ties off the fuse panel. Excuse me, runs to the back of the car. And then I have a taillight harness back there. Oh, gee whiz. And then I have the underhood harnesses. That's one there for the engine side. And I have this one over here. That's the wiper side and front lamps. And there'll be some wires to remove because I'm not going to need all the circuits. But what's nice about it is, it has the newer style push-in fuses, not the minis, but at least they're the push-in and not the glass. And since it was a fuel-injected car, it actually has some wiring already in it, running back to the gas tank area that I can use to pick the relay for the 450 fuel pump. And, it's a usable harness. You can buy aftermarket harnesses with, however many circuits you need. Down, I've seen them as low, I think maybe 12 circuits, up to about, in the 20s. But this is a pretty basic car. Not going to need a whole lot of circuits. But this is low buck. I mean, the aftermarket harnesses are not very expensive either. But, hey, it's $150 that I'm not spending because I had it on the shelf. So, I need to thin this thing out. And there'll be changes made. Like, this is the usual GM plugins for the ignition switch. I'll be cutting these wires and changing those to a ignition switch that'll be in the dash. This car had the wipers, the switch was on the steering column. That would be this connector here. So I got to cut these wires out and figure out which ones I'm going to use to run a regular wiper switch on the dash. These are going back to the turn signals, which will be another little project because I haven't checked yet. I don't know how many wires are on this turn signal. It could be 3, could be 5. I don't think it's like a newer car with all. I think they have 7 on the newer ones. You have to check. And these are all the wires that went to the factory cluster. Not going to need a lot of them. Some of them I'll cut back and use. And you get the point. I got to go through this harness and thin it out. And wiring is one of my favorite things to do. I must be a sadist, but I really enjoy doing wiring and thinning out harnesses and figuring out the circuits. If you don't want to do that, just buy an aftermarket harness. It'll be real easy. The only real work I have to do while doing all this is figuring out where to mount this fuse box, because this went through the firewall on the Monte Carlo, and you just cut a square hole for that to come through, which is pretty basic. Only problem is, on the 55 Buick, it really is not an easy place to put that to go through the firewall. So that I have to look into. So I'm going to start thinning this out, and I will label some wires and come back and show you where we're at. Okay, the basic wiring harness is done. So this was from an 87 Monte Carlo that was actually fuel injected, so it had some circuits I could save. So basically I kept just what's needed for the car, not too crazy. Fuse box, convenience center that has the flashers for the turn signals, hazards if I install hazards, has the horn relay, the chime will obviously go away. We got our stoplight switch with the wire out of that for the TCC lockup. We have the connectors for the wipers, ignition, and turn signals, which I will cut back and go through once it's installed in the car and I'm doing that wiring. Got a light for the map light. We got radio wires, and this car only had front speakers, so I got to add some wires for the back speakers. Got the SIG lighter for charging the phone, another convenience light, got some lights to go under the dash, footwell lights, power for a dome light, not dome light, a glove box light if needed. These are all the connections for the gauges. I kept some of the original wires for the water temp, oil pressure, since they already ran to the front of the car. Easy enough to just save those for future electric gauges. And everything else is pretty much factory. Powers, grounds, lights, high beam light, that kind of stuff. So that'll work out good, makes it easy to do. And then coming out of the fuse box, I have some few extra circuits that were actually ECM power switches or power circuits for the original computer, so I saved those. We got front lamp harness with wiper wiring that I'll deal with when I switch to electric wipers. And we got this other side of the fuse box, which is the power input. That's most of that. And on the end, I took the AC wiring out and kept the heater wiring and modified that a little bit to work with the Buick setup. And I'm keeping the resistive network for the fan, so I'll have multiple speeds. Kept the high-speed blower relay, so that worked out good. Then inside the car, got the intermediate harness that runs off the fuse box to the back of the car, way back there. That also has connections for the dome light, jam switches, so that'll make that easy to do. And then in the back connects to the taillight harness that I still have to pare down a little bit. I'll do that once it's in the car. And it also has wiring for a third brake light if I decide to put one in. But I think the taillights are pretty big on this car. I don't expect it. Some of my older cars have pretty small taillights, and people are morons and they don't seem to see brake lights, so sometimes a third brake light's a good idea. Just depends on the car. Alright, so I think that'll be it for this one. Next video, I will find a spot to mount this fuse box in the car and start stringing some wires and see where it goes from there.